I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Here's a check of first word news. President Trump's chief of staff has reassured presidential aides that no staff shakeup is imminent. That's according to White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who told reporters that John Kelly informed aides there are no immediate personnel changes at this time. Federal regulators say a Russian government hacking operation aimed at power grids in the U.S. did not compromise operations at any of the nation's nuclear power plants. Corporate networks at some of the plants licensed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission were affected by the hack, but no safety, security, or emergency preparedness functions were impacted. Florida authorities said today that the cables suspending a pedestrian bridge were being tightened after a stress test when the 950-ton concrete span collapsed over traffic Thursday, killing at least 6 people. The bridge collapse came just days after its installation was celebrated as a technological innovation. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi took to Twitter following the death of New York Democratic Congresswoman Louise Slaughter. Pelosi's tweet reads in part that she benefited from Slaughter's friendship and wise counsel for 30 years. The 88-year-old Slaughter died at a Washington hospital today. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists. I'm Mark Crumpton.
And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Apple's big reveal, why the tech giant is heading to the Midwest for its latest announcement, and what that means for classrooms everywhere. Plus, we dig into the UK tech scene after Brexit, a high-profile battle with Uber. Where do tech firms stand, as well as funding? And how Amazon's bottomless appetite became corporate America's nightmare. Why the biggest fear of so many businesses today is being Amazoned. But first, to our lead. When it comes to big announcements from Apple, the tech world lines up at its headquarters in Cupertino as Tim Cook and the company unveil the latest iPhone, Apple Watch, or something else. But its next big reveal is taking place on March 27th at a different location, a Chicago high school. And thanks to the invitation sent out, speculation is rampant about what this means, from a new Apple Pencil and iPad to a revamped strategy to dominate classrooms across the world. Here to tell us more, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who covers Apple and consumer technology. So what do you think is going to be happening here?
So, I mean, as the invitation indicates, I think it's going to be an education-focused event. Now, this wouldn't be the first time they've done this. They did this in between January and February of 2012. 6 years ago, they announced some new features for classrooms. It sounds like that's what they're going to do again this year. That, take it from it being announced at a high school in the Chicago area, which has one of the biggest public school systems in the entire world. New iPads definitely on deck, cheaper models, entry level, something geared towards students and teachers, being able to be purchased in bulk. Likely a cheaper version of the Mac laptop. It's going to be the 10-year anniversary of the MacBook Air. Actually, that was a couple weeks ago. Coming up is actually when it started shipping 10 years ago. So maybe they'll do something around that. New stuff in the book space, classroom space. They're working on a new framework called ClassKit, which basically allows developers to build education apps and distribute them to students and teachers more easily. And then a new version of iBooks that they're going to rename to Apple Books.
I'm sure everyone at the Lane Tech College Prep High School in Chicago is very excited about this. How big is Apple in the education system at this point? I mean, what do education products add to the bottom line, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, Apple's the unique technology company that has become synonymous with a few really key things. So one of them would be design, video production, millennials, I guess, these days with the iPhone. But education has always been a really core tenet of the company. From the very beginning, it was what Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak really founded it upon. And so they're showing they're not really going to let that go. They sort of had a rejuvenated approach to music with Apple Music, something they forgot about. In past years, iTunes started to languish, came out with Apple Music. Now it seems like they're going to do the same with education, really bring it back to the forefront of the company in terms of both new hardware and software product announcements. And I'm looking forward to going to Chicago to check it all out.
The iPad is a device that has struggled, though, growth has resurged, actually, over the last couple of years. I'm curious how much the iPad is a classroom device, versus something that is used more broadly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When I was in elementary school and middle school, I remember at our school we had iBooks. So the iBook G4, it's a thick laptop with battery life these days is much better. Apple computers. And I recently visited, after graduating from that school, I guess it would have been 10 or 12 years.
Let's not talk about how long ago you graduated. It's going to make me feel old.
And so now they have iPads, right? They have iPads. So clearly there's been a sea change in schools moving from laptops to iPads in terms of devices. Tons of kids use them. They love them. The iPad really has its loyalists, and a lot of them are kids.
So this is the same day as the Samsung S9 launch, right? Or is there a Samsung event also happening around this time?
Huawei is announcing their P20 phone on March 27th. And speaking of Samsung, you're completely right. So Samsung over the next week is rolling out their new S9 phone. It starts hitting stores today, and you can check out our review of that. But yeah, that's something people will be talking about around the same time as well.
Well, I mean, I'm sure everyone will continue to speculate. Why Chicago?
You know, it's interesting. It's one of the biggest school systems. They found a nice high school there. They have some connections to the Chicago, government, the mayor. They've met before, they're Apple executives. So there's some history there.
Talk to us about the other events coming up for Apple this year, WWDC in June.
Right. So on June 4th, Apple executives in San Jose will be announcing new versions of software and hardware for the Apple's latest products. So there's going to be iOS 12, which is a new version of the iPhone operating system. It's going to have some fun new features, like for Bloomberg users out there, it's going to have a new Stocks app. There's also going to be updates to Apple Music, Apple News. There's going to be new features for Animojis, being able to use them in a FaceTime call. They're also working on new iPad Pros with Face ID and Animojis. We've reported, so we might see those there. But the highlight for developers and for end users is sort of going to be the combination of Mac apps and iOS, iPhone, and iPad apps. So you can run the same app across different hardware, no matter if you're a Mac user or an iPad user. It's really going to up Apple's game in terms of the app ecosystems, which, as we know, has become extraordinarily important.
Last year at WWDC, they unveiled the HomePod. We got to speak with Tim Cook. It was very unusual for them to introduce a new hardware device at that time. Could we expect any surprises?
Right. So what Apple likes to do sometimes is unveil a device really geared towards its ecosystem, its loyal fan base, and developers at WWDC, and then actually release the hardware about 6 months later. They did that, like you said, last year with the HomePod and the iMac Pro. Those both came out December, and this HomePod came out in February. A few years before that, in 2013, they announced the Mac Pro in that June and released it in December. Apple's working on a new version of the Mac Pro, a redesigned version, plus an Apple new display for professionals. So it could make sense for them to give a sneak peek of that in June at WWDC and then release it towards the end of the year. But we won't know for sure until then.
Then in September, I'm sure we're expecting an iPhone launch.
So yeah, let's jump all the way to September. So September, they're going to announce 3 new iPhones, a giant 6.5-inch screen version of the iPhone, bigger iPhone 10, then an update to the current iPhone 10 design, as well as a lower-end cheap model with an LCD screen versus OLED, which should really boost the purchases of the device around the world.
And what are we expecting, other companies to be rolling out this year? I mean, what are we expecting from Samsung? What are we expecting from Huawei?
Yeah, so this Huawei phone, the P20 phone they're going to announce next week, it's been explained to me by some industry executives as one of the more exciting phone launches of the year. It's going to have a really unique design. It's going to have thin bezels and a notch, sort of like the iPhone. Huawei is going to be rolling that out in Paris, France, actually, which is interesting, speaking of off-site introductions. And Samsung, the S9, it's not an impressive leap over the S8, but what I really think is they're holding their fire until they come out with a whole new type of phone form factor, flexible, bendable, foldable screens as soon as the end of this year.
Wow. All right, Mark Gurman, I know you will keep us all updated every step of the way.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, our Apple and consumer tech reporter, Mark Gurman. Well, a day after the FBI warned of Russian hackers trying to breach key U.S. infrastructures like power plants and air transport systems, China is once again being accused of rampant hack attacks on U.S. companies. Cybersecurity firm FireEye says Chinese hackers have launched a wave of attacks at U.S. interests in the disputed South China Sea. The group of hackers are allegedly trying to breach U.S. engineering and defense companies, either linked to or operating in the area. Coming up, we will discuss how London's top officials are luring big tech to the city despite Brexit and increasing regulation. That is next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Altice is planning to sell off its telecom towers in France and Portugal. The company targeting 13,000 tower sites in the two countries in the first half of this year to dispose of assets and cut debt. The portfolio is the largest to ever come up for sale in Europe, according to Altice. The company also announced this week that it's begun exclusive talks to sell its international wholesale voice carrier business in France, Portugal, and the Dominican Republic. Well, the UK attracted record levels of investment from venture capital last year to help fuel its tech economy, and its leaders are hoping 2018 builds on that. Just last week, London Mayor Sadiq Khan spoke at South by Southwest to outline his ambition to make his city a global tech hub. Let's get straight to Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde in London for more on how London is luring big tech.
Emily, thank you very much. And indeed, I'm going to speak to the man whose job is to do just that. He's the first of London's chief digital officers ever. Theo Blackwell is touring the West Coast as we speak, and he joins us now on Bloomberg Technology. Theo, great to have you on Bloomberg Technology. And talk to us just about how much trade and investment you're managing to lure in from big tech into London. Have you signed any deals yet?
Well, we're here for two purposes. One is to bang the drum for the UK tech sector, and particularly London's tech sector. London is a city of convergence with over 40 tech sectors located there, from artificial intelligence to GovTech, clean tech, financial capital, obviously, of Europe. And secondly, we're over here to discuss smart cities, how we use data to make London a more livable place and also open up opportunities for business. And those two things together, we're over here supported by our team in London and Partners, which helps bring businesses to the UK and helps them start up there and deal with the regulation. Those two things together make this a great opportunity for us.
Are they worried about the regulation? In particular, are they worried about Brexit?
With Brexit, you have a mayor of London who has the biggest political mandate in UK history, who's banging the drum for the tech sector. He's in there talking to the government on a daily basis, pretty much, about the two big concerns the tech sector has about Brexit. The first is access to talent. We want London to continue to be a place where people can create world-class products and services, and for that to happen, you need to be able to create a world-class team. And so we're putting our concerns to the Secretary of State, David Davis, precisely on that issue. And secondly, we want to make sure that we are aligned with Europe on the approach to data, which is so important to the development of new technology companies.
Theo, you say how Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has been banging the drum for technology, but perhaps some of the big tech companies have been getting a bit hot under the collar with his talk at South by Southwest, in particular, of regulation and rules. I want you to take a listen to what he told us on Bloomberg TV just earlier this week.
My message to Uber, and a message to everyone, no matter how many lawyers you employ or PR experts, is you've got to play by the rules. The rules are there for everyone. And if you play by the rules, of course you can do business in London. I want London to be a place where disruptive companies come, where tech companies come.
Play by the rules. Now, notably, Sadiq Khan also talked about perhaps the need for regulation to keep up with technological advances. Will we see more regulation come into London in tech?
Look, I think what Sadiq was talking about is very much fulfilling his role as Mayor of London to promote community cohesion against hate speech, and his message at South by Southwest was warmly welcomed by many. In the future, cities will have a crucial role to play in the creation of standards so we can promote innovation. It was standards that created the growth of the railways in the 19th century through to the internet protocol in the late 20th century, and cities will be the crucibles of innovation for things like autonomous vehicles, for artificial intelligence. And those will require a discussion about the ethical framework in which they develop. And the UK, with initiatives from the government and cities, are the places where those discussions will be happening. So we welcome a debate about standards and rules and what people should play by, because we think that's also the foundation for innovation in the future. Of course, there will be old rules that we will need to reform, but we're happy to lead the debate on that. London, as well as the other great technology cities, New York and of course San Francisco, where I am at the moment.
And interestingly, of course, Sadiq Khan was talking about wanting social media giants, in particular the likes of Facebook, of YouTube, to go further and faster when it comes to tackling the issues of hate speech, of terrorist-related content and the like. What would you like to see to prove that they are going further and faster than perhaps regulation at the moment needs them to?
Well, Mayor Khan is in the process of contacting these companies to open up that dialogue. What can't be the case is that we allow to go unchallenged the kind of stirring up of racial hatred and indeed access to extremist material. I see already social media platforms responding to this call, and I think what's really important about this intervention is that there can be debates about laws at a national level, and maybe that's their proper responsibility. But for cities, which are the crucibles of diversity, cities have a special responsibility in this debate too, and it was really important that a leading city mayor made that point, and I think that's part of a form of digital activism that you're beginning to see with cities right across the world. Look at New York and its approach to net neutrality. Cities are taking a stand on things of importance to our citizens and indeed our businesses too.
Fascinating conversation. I wish we had more time. Theo Blackwell is London's Chief Digital Officer, the first ever Chief Digital Officer for the City of London, and it's great to have you while you're travelling through the West Coast. Come back here to London, have a chat with us in the studio. Emily.
Thank you so much.
Caroline, thank you so much. All right, coming up, cybersecurity platform Zscaler takes to the public market. We'll catch up with the company's CEO next. And if you have a Bloomberg terminal, check out TV Go. You can watch us online, click on our charts and graphics, interact with us directly over the IB. Just go to TV Go on your terminal. You can also contact us on Twitter. I'm at Emily Chang TV, and check out TikTok by Bloomberg, the first 24-hour global news network streaming live on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. Overstock.com says the U.S. SEC's crypto probe is threatening its business. The online retailer warned the investigation could delay its initial T0 coin offering and impact future ventures. While investors eagerly await the upcoming IPOs of Dropbox and Spotify, the public listing of a lesser-known tech company on Today could be an indicator of things to come. Shares in cloud security business Zscaler climbed 106% on its first day of trading. Bloomberg's Alex Barinka is standing by with more. Alex?
That's right, Emily. Zscaler is the first large notable tech listing in the U.S. this year. And I have the pleasure of speaking now with Chief Executive Officer Jade Chaudhry, who joins us from the NASDAQ Global Exchange in Times Square, where the share is listed. Jay, thanks for joining us today. I want to jump right in, and I'm curious to why list this time. You've been around in the tech industry for decades. You've had and sold 4 companies in the past. Why is this the company that you're going to hold on to?
It's exactly for the same reason, Alex. I did 4 companies. They were point products, and eventually most of the point products got sold. And then I said, I have no more interest in doing one more company and flipping it. So from day one, the desire was to build a lasting company, to build a sales force of cloud security and take it public and build a lasting one. So that's why we're here.
And cloud security is a very large market. Break down for us a little bit more what exactly Zscaler does for its customers.
Yeah, security is a complex topic. Most of the security in the enterprise today sits in the data center. And that's because in the old world, employees sat in the office, applications in the data center, and you secured the office and the data center using a castle and moat approach, and through a drawbridge, you went in and out to the internet, and the drawbridge used to be appliances. Now, we work everywhere, in the office, coffee shop, airport, and even on our airplanes. and applications have moved to the cloud. The security is still sitting in the data center. It's becoming irrelevant. Security must move to the cloud, and that's what Zscaler did. We purpose-built from a clean slate a platform so every user of a given customer can have great experience while they use applications in the cloud or the internet. And it is that purpose-built design that sets us apart. We did what Salesforce did to Siebel, with what Workday did to PeopleSoft. We built a multi-tenant application that works for the cloud. We're born in the cloud for the cloud.
And when you do think about these born in the cloud companies, you have some of the legacy tech providers or older tech providers also trying to push cloud security, the likes of Cisco, Symantec, EMC. You run down the chain and they're all pushing in. With this pie growing to potentially upwards of $4 billion in the next 3 years, according to a number of the industry analysts out there, how are you expanding to grab a bit more of that pie?
So some of the companies you mentioned, they built great products that were designed to sit in the data center. When paradigm shift takes place, incumbents rarely make it across because the technologies needed are disruptive. They need to be built from a clean slate. Just like you can't take power generators designed for your home use and stick 1,000 of them in a power plant, in a factory, and say I'm a power plant. In the same way, the appliances built by traditional security companies are what's known as single tenant. They really don't work for the cloud. And the reason we are getting traction with all these large enterprises, whether it's GE or it's Siemens or it's AutoNation, because they see the value, and we are securing thousands of the employees that are working anywhere and everywhere and accessing applications in the cloud. So we are designed for the new world. And unless the traditional companies build something with a clean slate, they'll stumble just like Siebel and PeopleSoft did.
And as we continue to watch you trade, we will see if that does ring true. Jay Chowdhury joining me from NASDAQ in New York. Today, shares up 106% on listing day for his company Zscaler. Emily?
Alex, thanks for bringing that one to us. All right, coming up, what is corporate America most worried about? Being Amazon, how the tech giant's domination is impacting almost everything. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's check with First Word News. Washington wants its European allies to agree to further measures against Iran in return for keeping a landmark nuclear deal with Tehran alive. That's according to the Associated Press, which cites 2 U.S. officials. Speaking after closed-door meetings between the U.S., Iran, Russia, and other major world powers in Vienna, U.S. diplomats indicated an American walkout from the deal isn't a foregone conclusion yet. That's despite harsh words about the agreement from President Trump. Washington opposes the so-called Sunset Clause, which allows restrictions on Iran's nuclear enrichment program to expire in 2025. The United Nations Security Council is again demanding a ceasefire throughout Syria and backing a UN-endorsed roadmap for a peaceful transition and elections. The special envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, briefed the Security Council from Brussels.
In the other 2 enclaves of Eastern Ghouta, further south, we have seen no ceasefire to speak of, and to borrow the words of the Secretary General, people are still living in a hell on earth. Scores killed and the injured unattended because health workers could not reach them due to relentless airstrikes.
The Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar tells Bloomberg that any deal the UK makes with the EU after it exits the bloc has to be beneficial for Ireland.
Brexit is obviously a huge concern for Ireland. It's not our policy, it's a British policy, but we are very much affected by it. Even though the United Kingdom is leaving the European Union, we're not. We're staying in the EU, we're in the Eurozone, we're in the single market, and there's over 80% support for Europe in Ireland, so we're staying put. But we want to make sure that whatever new relationship exists between the EU and the UK is one that is close and first of all doesn't damage our economy.
The global chemical weapons watchdog says the class of nerve agents that Britain alleges was used to poison a Russian ex-spy and his daughter has never been declared to the organization by any member state. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons also says it expects, quote, some action will be taken soon in response to its offer to help the British investigation. The UK representative to the organization says British authorities and police are working to allow the OPCW to independently verify the type of nerve agent used. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. In New York, I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Tech behemoth Amazon was born as an online bookstore. Fast forward 24 years, it now occupies warehouses, grocery stores, and other physical real estate equivalent to 90 Empire State Buildings with a little left over. Jeff Bezos' brainchild has been fast growing for most of its life, but has entered a new phase. Its dominance can't be contained. Amazon has grown so large, it's worth taking stock of why and how it has left corporate America so thoroughly freaked out. Executives at the biggest U.S. companies mentioned Amazon thousands of times during investor calls last year, according to transcripts, more than President Trump, and almost as often as taxes. Joining us now, Bloomberg Gadfly, Shira Ovide, who wrote this piece in the latest issue of Bloomberg Business Week. Also with us, the CEO of the e-commerce software platform Boomerang Commerce, Guru Hariharan, who is also a former Amazon cloud business leader. So, Shira, I want to start with you. Obviously, we know Amazon is incredibly powerful, but it's also now incredibly complicated, and its power is difficult to comprehend. You also start your piece out by saying Amazon makes no sense. Why?
I mean, look, there are very few companies in the world that are loved by investors and as sprawling as Amazon is, right? If you think about the scope of their operations, they now own a 470-store grocery chain. They have this large Amazon Web Services that does cloud computing. They obviously have an e-commerce operation. They do 1- and 2-hour delivery in many cities. They'll deliver restaurant food. They have a web video service, right? So there are not that many companies that are as sprawling as Amazon is in an era where investors prize focus in public corporations.
So Guru, Shira talks about the fear of being Amazoned. What should businesses be afraid of? What are they afraid of?
Well, there's a lot to be said about all the companies being impacted by, there's so many companies being impacted by Amazon. But one story that not many people have talked about is that of brand manufacturers and consumer packaged goods. Now, these companies are used to selling to retailers through human relationships. And if you think about the companies like Pepsi, Mondelez, General Mills, all these publicly traded companies have to completely rebuild what they have been doing so far, because Amazon doesn't work with the archaic systems that other retailers have been made them used to. They're all, if you're a VP of sales at a large brand, you're going out for dinner with the chief merchant and negotiating a deal. But decisions at Amazon are being made by algorithms. You can't take an algorithm out for dinner. So that's where you have to start thinking about technology and putting the technology underpinnings and rebuilding your entire people, process, and technology stack with sort of having that artificial intelligence technology as the base of the pyramid.
I want to talk about some specific examples. You brought up vacuum cleaners. Dyson, of course, a top vacuum cleaner brand, but I went and searched on Amazon today for a vacuum cleaner, and Dyson was like at the bottom of the page. And that can have a huge impact on sales, right?
Yes, that is a big problem right now because, again, going back to...
Why? So first of all, why is it at the bottom of the page?
Well, so there are lots and lots of parameters that go behind determining what goes in the top or bottom of the search page. And in fact, Amazon's search page is about 90% of where the clicks are being generated on Amazon. About 80 to 90% of sales that happen on Amazon are happening on the search page. If you may, this is your modern shelf. This is your modern aisle, the future aisle. And you've got to have your products prominently displayed on this future aisle. And that's not through retailer relationships. That's not by having a dinner. You have to figure out your content, your out of stock, your profitability, your pricing. There's like 15 to 20 parameters that are changing every single second that you have to be on top of. The problem is if you're a Dyson or a Red Bull or a Duracell even. Duracell is another example where they are #1 battery seller in the US, but they're not even in the top 3 on Amazon, because you cannot depend on the age-old relationship model. You have to have a technology underpinning in what we do. So it's almost like you have to change your entire process of managing a retailer relationship when it comes to Amazon.
I wonder, Shira, though, should we feel so sorry for these businesses? I mean, obviously, isn't Amazon also an opportunity for these businesses and for businesses that could disrupt the incumbents, essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's totally a fair point, that Amazon, I think, for a lot of companies, particularly some small companies, has been a godsend, right? Because in the olden days, if you were a small company, maybe you couldn't afford to get your product in front of people on the shelves at Walmart. But Amazon gives you a much bigger playing field, right? That you can be a small person and sell merchandise on Amazon.com. The tricky thing, of course, as Guri pointed out, that you have to get noticed. And if people are going to Amazon to search and they're clicking for the top results, those top results may not be that small mom and pop in a garage in Denver. It might be a large brand, or it might be one of Amazon's own brands, which I think is part of the disruptive element of Amazon too, right? So Duracell, the big battery seller, it competes on Amazon with Amazon's own brands of batteries, right? And Amazon has the power, if it wants to kind of advantage its own brands above those of brands that are popular elsewhere.
That's a really important point. Guru, your company examines the role of AI and machine learning in dealing with Amazon. What can companies do, and what should they be doing to beat the algorithm, essentially?
Well, it's not really about beating the algorithm, it's about working with the algorithm, right? So first of all, you put the shopper in the center. The customer is the shopper, not the retailer. That's a sea shift in as the way the CPG companies should think about. And then they should deploy machines to work with machines, as opposed to deploying a human to work with machines. And what that means is you're essentially having your team making strategic decisions on where to win on price, where to win on marketing, and where should I invest in stock levels and all of those things. But then really have the machine start doing the tactical decisions on a day-to-day basis. So the technology platforms that we have been building are around that, in helping these brand manufacturers make that transition from going from a very human-intensive retailer relationship to something which is human-guided but machine-driven retailer relationship with Amazon.
So, what is the next phase for businesses? I mean, obviously they're learning, right? But some companies are going to figure it out faster than others.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, if you look around with the brands that are winning on Amazon, companies like RX Bar, which just got swooped up by Kellogg's for a whopping $600 million when they were doing just double-digit millions in sales, that just proves the point that the entire stack being driven by technology first is so valuable, and it's going to write the fingerprint of the future of retail. So you have to start small, but have a C-level vision. You cannot just have a bolt-on on an e-commerce, on your traditional stack, which is built for store retail, and say, I'm done with e-commerce. Now, you can't do that. You have to rethink. The CEO has to be driving the change. You start small. You start with, say, handling Amazon with technology. You empower your sales team with technology-driven, with technology that drives the sales. Then you empower your marketing team to start using Amazon marketing services and start doing automated bidding, as opposed to just punching in numbers or writing above-the-line marketing dollars or trade dollars. Then you take it to supply chain teams. Supply chain is going to be a big problem for these companies. Traditionally, CPG companies have been fulfilling truckloads or pallets of goods. And now, if you order something on Amazon, like say a toilet roll or something like that, you get each one in a box being shipped by Procter & Gamble, right? It's coming from their warehouse. So how do you sort of empower all your teams across your enterprise to drive business through technology as opposed to humans.
Okay, Guru Kariharan, Boomerang Commerce CEO, thank you. Shira Ovide of Bloomberg Gadfly in New York. I'm sure you'll continue to keep us posted on how scared of Amazon businesses should be. Catch the full piece in the latest issue of Bloomberg Business Week. Well, Walmart is in talks for a $7 billion deal to become the largest investor in India's e-commerce giant Flipkart. According to people familiar with the matter, that would put Walmart in competition with Amazon in one of the world's fastest growing online retail markets. The deal may push Flipkart's valuation to about $20 billion. Coming up, Tesla has gotten one of their cars to outer space, but can the company keep getting them out the factory door? We'll discuss the bumps Tesla is hitting on the road through what Elon Musk has called production hell. This is Bloomberg. Well, the man who famously bet big against Enron is at it again. This time, his target is Tesla. Short seller Jim Chanos says he thinks Tesla stock is worthless. Helping him come to the conclusion, a recent string of high-profile exits at the electric car company and continuing reports that have people questioning whether or not Tesla can meet its production targets for cars like the Model 3. Joining me now from New York, Bloomberg Business Week columnist Max Chafkin. Here in the studio, Bloomberg Tech's Eric Newcomer, who has a deep dive into Tesla's woes in the latest Bloomberg Tech newsletter, Fully Charged. So, Eric, Chanos hasn't been mincing words about Tesla. This one is especially harsh. Is it really worthless?
Well, you know, he's been coming after them for a while. You know, he spoke at the Vanity Fair conference back in 2016.
I was there.
You know, the worthless comment was the end of 2017. So this is just, what's really happening this week is the evidence against Tesla has piled up some more. Production problems continue. There have been a number of reports. And then also turnover has become a real problem. So on both fronts, when short sellers are looking at companies, you know, executive turnover is certainly a red flag. So it wasn't a great week for Tesla.
Right. We've talked about the executive turnover. Max, you know, the stock has been resilient despite these warnings from people like Jim Chanos, despite the bad news about production, despite the executive turnover. Why?
Well, I mean, and I think Chanos has acknowledged this, and I think the sort of reasoning behind his bet, at least the reasoning that I find most compelling, is the idea that there is sort of an Elon Musk premium for Tesla. Investors understand that in many ways Tesla is not as well run or effective a car company as Ford, but it has all this potential to one day, you know, sell more electric cars than anybody, and that is because of Elon. Now, if I think the Chanos argument goes, if Elon leaves, which he has said he will at some point, then the stock would plummet. So I think that's where he's coming from, and I think as long as, you know, Elon Musk is there and is continuing to project confidence, and also importantly, you know, continuing to come out with new ideas like the semi-truck, we're going to see investors willing to go along for the ride. The problem is once these production numbers start coming out, that's where we're really going to start to see just how well or how poorly Tesla's doing.
So, well, he hasn't left yet, even though, Eric,
right.
he said he will. You know, some people are doubtful that he ever will give up Tesla.
Well, he has a huge, they just introduced a huge compensation package to keep him around. So I think that is giving people some confidence that he'll stay. I mean, to add to the short case, I mean, there's just a lot of spending that's gone on at Tesla. I think, you know, at the end of the year, they had somewhere above $3 billion cash on hand and had spent like $1 billion a quarter last year on average. So there's just this general march towards Tesla's going to continue to need more money, and they've already pushed back their production targets again and again. So it's if they don't sort of deliver on the Model 3s that they've said they will, there will be a real question about having to raise more money and tapping the debt markets.
Max, what do the numbers tell us about the likelihood of Model 3 production picking up and hitting targets over the course of this year?
Well, in terms of what Tesla's saying, I mean, Tesla says that they're on track. They've revised that. Now they've revised that track a couple of times, but they say they're on track with their revised thing. The Bloomberg model shows that, which is based on sort of publicly available information as well as submissions from Tesla owners, suggests that they're behind schedule. But again, we don't really know how close the model is yet, and it's gonna take at least a few weeks before we have much of a sense. The probably important thing to know though is that because Tesla has this track record of missing expectations, you could make the argument that a missed deadline or a lower production number for Tesla means a little bit less than it does for other companies. At South by Southwest, Elon Musk said he's trying to be maybe a little bit less aspirational with his goals and his deadlines, but yeah, that's definitely at play here with Tesla.
All right, Max Chafkin in New York, Eric Newcomer here in the studio. Thank you both. We're going to continue to follow the road for Tesla ahead.
Thank you.
All right, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin visited Tim Cook Friday at Apple headquarters in Cupertino. In a tweet, he said, "Thank you for your commitment to invest $350 billion in USA." Earlier this year, Apple said it would be investing that amount in the country over the next 5 years, taking into account a 4th U.S. campus and several thousand new hires. The company is also bringing back most of its overseas cash as part of new U.S. tax laws and recently granted most employees $2,500 worth of restricted stock units. Coming up, Mitch Kapor was an early investor in Uber, but has been critical of the troubled ride-hailer. So what does he think of new leadership under CEO Dara Khosrowshahi? We'll hear from him next. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Manas Krani.
And I'm Yusuf Kamaluddin. We have a busy week ahead in the region.
The growth next year are looking very positive.
We have a very positive perception of the future of the industry.
Are we seeing the foothills of rebirth in these kind of stocks?
I don't think we should be restricted from developing our uranium.
We should have at least $2 trillion assets under management.
Mitch Kapor is an entrepreneur, investor, and supporter of social causes. As partner at Kapor Capital, he works to make big returns, but also push for change, investing in companies with women founders or an underrepresented background. And he's been critical of companies like Uber for falling behind on social issues. Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde caught up with Kapor in London and asked if he's seen a positive change in Uber. Take a listen.
I think on the whole, Uber is doing enormously better under the new CEO, under Dara, who has been cleaning up mess after mess after mess. He's genuinely committed. He is not afraid to make hard decisions, and a bunch of people have been let go, and understands that he's got to preside over a fundamental change of the culture or Uber is not going to succeed, and so far he's doing well.
Do you think that that could ever repeat itself again? Do you think, though, perhaps that hearts and minds and ethics have changed within startup building, and we will not see scale have to sacrifice ethics and behavior?
Oh, I think the likelihood of more explosive growth startups developing very powerful new platforms run by brilliant, young, asocial founders, I don't think we're done with that.
And so what do we do to ensure that that doesn't become a force for bad, and that we do ensure that companies grow in the way in which LPs would like them to?
Well, one thing that's different now is people are speaking up, from hashtag #MeToo to just all of the women and others in Silicon Valley. I don't think people are going to be silenced anymore. And so the question is, what's the response of the VC community? What are the response of the big companies? Do they really try to institute comprehensive, systematic reforms from the top down that really say, okay, we're going to figure out how to build cultures that are inclusive and workforces that are diverse? Or do they settle for cheap and easy, well, we'll post a link to our sexual harassment policy on our website? That in and of itself is just not going to get us where we need to get.
Do you think that VC and big companies will make comprehensive change, as you call for?
I think the window is still open to do that. I'm a hopeful person, but I'm also a skeptic. We are working very hard to keep that window open, but I am not counting on it at all.
What about big tech in Silicon Valley at the moment? There seems to be a focus on perhaps Facebook, Google in particular, whether it's from the regulators or whether it's from the user base, from worrying about perhaps the way in which they've scaled themselves and perhaps they've become too omnipotent. How do you address that?
It is a huge dilemma. I mean, there's no question the big platform owners of Facebooks and Googles have an extraordinary amount of power, and they have, without intending to, allowed great harm to happen to our democratic process, to people's quality of individual lives, and they're now trying to grapple with that. But the fact is, good intentions aren't what counts. It's the impact, the effect of what you do. I would be uncomfortable and losing sleep if I were on Facebook's board of directors, because their business model is integral to the kinds of harms that it has done. And can they stop messing things up and still meet their financial objectives? I don't see an answer on the table.
That was Mitch Kapor, partner at Kapor Capital, talking with Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Reminder, we're live streaming on Twitter. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. We will see you next week.